So, hi, Mike.
Hi,
Lovely.
Sandra. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you.
Good, good. And thank you so much. Honestly, I know I've said it, but thank you so much for being on here today. So for those of you that don't know Mike, this is Mike Blissett, who I've had the absolute pleasure of working with for a few years now, and it's been an absolute dream. So Mike is a professional speaker, trainer, coach, and there's something else I've forgotten here. Is that it, Mike? That's a lot, but is there anything else I've missed?
That's it.
Great.
I've written some books as well, and make online courses, and but I think you probably hit the the essence of what I do. Yeah.
That's wonderful. And you help, don't you? Don't you help professional speakers to also present? Is that right?
I do. Yeah. Yeah. That's the training, presentation skills training, and coach training. So yeah.
Fantastic. That's great. So if anybody needs any skills in training, in presenting, that's you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
But I've got Mike on here today because Mike has a story that I've always felt was inspiring when I work with Mike. I hear this story. And the reason I said what Mike does now is because I want you to hear his story of where he was and how he is where he is now, because it's inspirational. And sometimes we can get stuck in that whole thing of we can't create our own reality from where we are. Would you agree with that, Mike? Sometimes we can get stuck in that story.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. And suddenly we can turn around and it can be months or even years later. So yeah, we can get majorly stuck in a story.
Yeah. And I really want you to, if you don't mind, share your story with us, and also how you got to where you are now, knowing where you started from, and how really that could have kept you stuck in a place that certainly could have been disempowering. And it certainly could have, if you had allowed it, created a different life for you than what you have now. So over to you, Mike. If you could tell us your story, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
So shall I start with where I am now and then go back, or start at the beginning?
Well, everybody kind of knows what you do now. So if you could start at the beginning, and then how did you, knowing where you came from, how did you manage to overcome that?
Sure. So where I am now, I'm as you were saying, I'm a coach and trainer, speaker, and I get to do some fun things and travel and make videos and talk with some great people and travel, and I love traveling, and so well, in normal times. And so I when I'm training sometimes with a group, I say, my life is, it feels like it's been kind of blessed, and I know I live an interesting life, and that does feel like a blessing. So that's where I am now. And where I began, I actually began with a stammer, with a stutter. And I don't remember when it started. My mum used to say that before I started school, I didn't stutter. I just used to talk a lot. And then within a few months of starting school, I had a really bad stammer. And that stayed with me through school, through college, through into my 20s. And I was a short kid, a shy kid, very much an introvert. I still am. And so I was perfect to be picked on and bullied and ridiculed. And so that was just my reality. That's what I grew up with. And so even into my first jobs when I left school, it's still, I thought it would be different, and it wasn't. I still couldn't say my name. I still couldn't reply to, when people were talking to me. And my mum went to my first interview with me for my first job, and did the talking for me, which looking back is kind of funny, but at the time it was gosh, it was terrible. I mean, she did really well, and I got the job, but wow. And yeah, so I I came across I think Malcolm Gladwell talks about finding this kind of tipping point where it comes to a point where you just can't live this way again. You can't do this. And then it's almost like it clicks and something else begins, not necessarily what you want, but it clicks into almost like a different kind of state or reality. And I was about 25 or 26. And I always wanted to be a singer. I wanted to be in the school shows. I just went to a secondary school, but they just happened to do a show every year, usually a musical. And I was too shy. I couldn't say my name. I couldn't go to auditions, read aloud or anything. And so I used to turn the page for the teacher who used to play the piano to accompany the songs in the show. I was his page turner. Okay. So I was in the show, but I wasn't on the stage. Yeah. So I always wanted to be on the stage. And long story short, when I was working in a factory in my mid-20s, and I always used to sing when I was working. It's just something I always did. And one of my friends at the factory played guitar in a group. And as happens in a group, they had an argument with the singer, and the singer left. And they'd made it to the final of a local competition a few weeks later. And so he said, "Oh, you sing, you're musical. Why don't you join the group?" And it was my tipping point. I just hated the factory. I worked 12-hour night shifts. It was horrible, and I knew that it's how many people live. It's just it didn't feel like it was my life that I was living. I was just living something because I couldn't do what I wanted to do. And so I said yes. And 3 weeks later I was on stage in front of about 200 people with this band that, we sounded terrible. And of course we didn't win the competition, but the thing is, it began a journey. And I remember I don't usually share the story, but when the band played the intro to the first song, and I walked up to the microphone, it was on the microphone stand, and the microphone was sitting there waiting for me on top of the mic stand. And it's really, really loud, and they were making a racket because it was a pop group. And then I sang into the mic, and when we'd done all the practicing actually in the guitarist's living room, it was all without mics and amplifiers or anything. We still made a racket, but we could hear each other. And when I sang into the microphone that time, it was so loud. Well, a couple of things. Number one, I didn't realize that when you sing into a microphone on stage in a rock concert, you can't actually hear yourself. You can't hear the sound of your own voice coming out of your mouth. Okay. What you can hear is the sound of your voice having gone through all the reverb and amplifiers and all this stuff coming out the speakers on the side of the stage. Yeah. And so you hear a version of your voice. And that was the first time I heard my voice, and I actually liked it. I wasn't stuttering. I didn't stutter when I sang. That's why I like singing. Yeah. And that was like, that was the beginning. That was, I had the bug. And so anyway, I joined the group. We fell out a few weeks later, as groups do. But then I had the bug. I started another group, and I just started to songwrite. And then then we decided to do more gigs around the country. And then we decided to move to London. And then, of course, there was a big argument, and we fell out, and the other group. And so it never actually happened. But I had the dream. I wanted to be on stage. I could see that I could do something. I still stuttered really badly, but I decided to get on a train from Lincolnshire, where I'm from, and get a train to London and not go back. And I arranged it. I had £200 in my pocket and a plan to make it work in London. Yeah. And it was really hard. I worked in a shoe shop, which it was horrible, but I kind of blagged my way into it. And I used to live off sandwiches for the first few months because I couldn't afford to eat kind of real food back then. And they weren't the kind of nice range of sandwiches I have now. These were in the early 80s, before the Pretz and the Subways and all the rest of it. Yeah. So it really was just living off sandwiches. Yeah. And around the same time, I read a magazine, and there was an article in the magazine about, I don't know, remember what it was, whether it was about smoking cessation, giving up smoking or losing weight or something. And it was about how hypnosis can help you to achieve that. And I just read the article, and at the end of the article, it had a list of other things that hypnosis could be useful for. And in that list was stuttering. And so this is the time when I started to sing, and I started to build my confidence being on stage and going to auditions and all this stuff. And equally, then I found a hypnotherapist, and I saw her just for about 6 weeks, just because I didn't have enough money to do it any longer. But it helped. It started to ground me and get centered. I didn't know what she was doing. I thought it was this little old lady. She was, I don't know how she seemed very old to me at the time, probably in her 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
And I thought I was going to be, she's going to take over my mind. And it was all very scary. And of course, it was nothing like that. It was very relaxed, very tranquil, just very beautiful. And I started to calm down, and I started to become aware of my voice and my throat and where I was breathing from, at the same time as getting a singing teacher, because I wanted to improve and strengthen my voice for the singing I was doing. So this is almost like the universe starting to almost like align or conspire with me. And I wasn't fighting against it. I was going with it.
Yeah.
And so that was fast forward 20 years. I had a singing career. I was a singer-songwriter. I did some touring. I did a lot of recording. I didn't become famous, but actually looking back, all I wanted was a number one. But of course, that wasn't the point. The point was to become who I was meant to become. Yeah. And so I had an amazing career. So I don't have to talk about it now thinking, I used to really like singing. I wish I'd been a singer. I wish I'd have toured, and I actually did it. And so that's incredible. Yeah. And the thing is that when I decided to stop singing, it wasn't a sudden decision. It kind of slowly just evolved into that. I decided not to go to so many auditions. I stopped traveling so much, because it sounds really great traveling, but when you do it all the time, it's still amazing what you do, that 1 hour, 2 hours on stage, but all the rest of it, the driving up and down, and eating in petrol stations and all that, 3 o'clock in the morning, it loses its shine. Yeah. And so I just decided to put down some roots, and that's when I actually settled in London. And so I've been here for, I guess, about 30 years now, and eventually and I just worked in a bank when I settled in London, just because it was a day job. It was something I was doing in between auditions, and I just happened to be good at it. So I stayed there for a few years. But I found that wasn't for me, because whilst it was security, supposedly, and they paid me a salary, which for a singer is incredible. Yeah. And people call me Mr. Blissett and have my name on my door of my office and things. For me, and so it ticked so many boxes, but for me, after even just a few months, it started to feel almost like a prison. And because I was used to traveling up and down the motorway and getting on flights and singing and larking around and being cheeky with 200 people a night on stage. And now I was talking a serious business in an office, which looked really nice, but it just wasn't me. It wasn't my life that I was living. But it was, looking back now, it was a transition into the next thing, because I just happened to like books, and there was a Books Etc. shop next door, which I don't know if you remember Books Etc. But I used to escape there at lunchtime and leave my phone in the office so they couldn't call me. And just read books. And I found the self-help section. I found a book about coaching, and I thought, wow, this is for me. This is what I do in the bank, but it's not about selling credit cards and loans and pensions and mortgages and all this stuff. This is all about the person you're working with, the client. Yeah. And so a few weeks later, I was starting my training to become a coach, and then from coaching. From becoming a coach, I was asked to deliver some training, because they knew I used to be on stage. So they clients figured I could do both. And so I still do that now. And the thing is, for many years, the question you asked me, Sandra, about to tell my story, I would tell a story. I would tell a story about coming from Grantham, and I'd say some jokes about nobody's ever heard of it, and Mrs. Thatcher was from there. And so I've got my stock of jokes for that. I used to talk about my singing and traveling and recording and falling off stage. I've got so many stories about that, but the one story I would never share was the stammer. And it was a friend of mine that used to always say to me, why don't you share that? Why don't you share about the stammer? And for me, it was the most, it was a very traumatic experience for me, because it was a severe stutter. And it represented a time when I was bullied really badly, relentlessly for many, many years. And so it was my deepest, darkest secret. And even if I did share it, why would anybody be interested in something that was so depressing? I thought it was so depressing because for me at the time, it was really depressing. Of course, but my friend kept pushing me to say, well, just try it out, just try it out. And it took me about a couple of years to get convinced that just to try it out. And so I started to mention it. And it was almost like it again, it was a shift, it was a turning point. Something clicked, and then my business completely changed, and people started to remember my coaching and training, not necessarily for what I delivered in the coaching and training, but actually, oh, you're the guy that used to stammer and then became a singer. And they found that really inspiring, and I would never have guessed that. And one thing I kind of noticed through the years is that so what impact does that have on a life? Because I think you said in the beginning, Sandra, that if by having these experiences, if I didn't have this experience, if I didn't have the stutter, that's probably had the most impact in my life. If I didn't have it, what kind of life would I have had? I'd have had a different life. And for many years, the stutter was the thing I hated the most. But I got to a point a few years ago now, probably more than 10 years ago now, and I just had a realization one day, and I don't know, I'm doing some work on something. I just had a realization that, you know what? That's probably the biggest gift. That's probably the thing, because if I hadn't had the stutter, I would be living a different life. I'd be working in a factory. I'd be an engineer, a doctor, a lawyer. I'd be working in an office. I'd be doing something else. It would be fine. But it wouldn't be this life. And this life, as I said in the beginning, this feels like a blessing. So that's kind of, I guess that's the story where I am now. So I get paid to tell my story and tell silly jokes and equally share with people how they can connect with, whether it's an audience or a camera, because in normal times when we're not in this kind of crisis, people usually, I never realized this, people go off sick at work because they've been asked to give a presentation at a meeting. And that's the majority of the work I do in normal times in businesses, is give workshops on how to overcome nerves and feel more confident when you're speaking up at a meeting. But equally now, during these days, it's of course Zoom calls and video presentations and online courses, and still people get nervous in front of the camera. So that's kind of, so I get paid to tell my story, and so this whole life, this whole experience has brought me to this point, and that feels good. That's a blessing.
I mean, when I hear it, Mike, I get all emotional even when I hear it now, because to be bullied for something is, and when it's traumatic for you, that's a big load to carry. It's heavy. It's a very heavy load to carry, and yet you've managed to and I don't even want to say overcome, because that kind of gives it an energy I don't want to give it. But you've used it, I suppose, is you've used it as the gift, as the blessing that you've just said, to, as we've said, to create a life that
I think it's a one of the concepts I share sometimes when I'm training, and it's the concept of the kind of Eastern martial arts. I don't do any of them, but so things like Tai Chi I've done, and again, I might get this slightly wrong, but this is my understanding of it, in that in life there will be things that come towards us. There will be challenges, and very much, and I'm generalizing, in the West, when something challenges us in life, our reaction is to push it away, is to overcome it, and in that kind of way of thinking, it's really who is the strongest, the quickest, and the fastest. And I was a small, short kid, a shy kid, and so that wouldn't work for me. But the Eastern philosophies is that it still accepts that there will be, life will throw challenges, people will challenge us sometimes, but then it's what we do with that challenge. How do we accept it? So we can accept it almost like I'm not going to do my kung fu moments here, but it's that you accept the challenge, and instead of trying to push it away, you just redirect it into another direction. So it's less likely that it's going to hurt you or equally hurt the challenger as well. And so with what has happened in my life, it's not that I've overcome it. I've learned to live with what happened. A couple of things happened. One, a couple of years ago, I decided to, I got the idea to write a new book, and and it's where I am now on this journey, having not overcome it, but it's where I am now, and I'm still, I guess, processing. And the title of the book, or the working title of the book, is called How to Be Invisible. How to Be Invisible, because thinking back to those school days, that the only way that I could think I might not be bullied in a classroom or out of school was to be invisible. So to sit in the middle row, or to hide in the toilets, or skip school even, it got that bad, but to be invisible. And that works, that can work to some degree when you're at school and you're avoiding punches or whatever.
Sure.
But when you're in your 20s and 30s and you're trying to run a business, and your natural kind of default is to be invisible, it means I just remember I used to go to networking events many years ago, and I talked to the waiting staff that were pouring the coffee because I was too shy to talk to other people, and that's how invisible shows up. So I think one of the lessons I've had to learn as I've grown, into my mid years, is how to be visible. Because I learned how to be invisible, almost like the Harry Potter invisible cloak. It's been a strange kind of thing, but that is something that I became aware of, as I say, just a couple of years ago, and I've got the kind of the thing with the book for me is that you get the idea, and then it's almost like a big bang, and so there's still a lot of confusion and things are going around, but eventually it'll start to set into some sort of an order, and that will be the chapters and the stories you put into a book. And so it's starting to form, but it's not formed to the point where I sit down and I write it yet. And and then just something very, very recently, actually a couple of weeks ago, one of my friends from school, you probably know this, Sandra, I used to tell a story of when my teacher used to call the registration at secondary school, when we were 14, 15, 16, and it got to my name, and my friend at the side of me used to say yes for me. And I never asked him, and I never thanked him, and I never asked him why he did it, but he did it, and that saved my life so many times. And because on some of the lessons that he wasn't there, the lesson would start with the registration, and I'd have to say my name, I'd have to say yes, and it would be, and I just couldn't get it out, and people would start mimicking me and catcalling, and it would be just, even though looking back, at the time it felt like an eternity. Of course, it was only a few seconds long. But my friend helped me out so many times. And then, of course, we lost touch. I moved away from Grantham, and I haven't seen him for more than 30 years, probably longer than that.
Yeah.
And then I saw a couple of weeks ago, he died. Just on Facebook, one of my ex-school friends mentioned that he shared that he died. And there was a lot of people I haven't heard of for all these years commenting, saying, they were sorry and condolences, and they remember him from school and all that kind of stuff. And one of the people that wrote a comment saying that he was a good guy and he used to be the goalkeeper for them in football was one of the bullies. That I haven't even thought about all these. I just, I haven't kept in touch, obviously.
Sure.
But I saw him, and I checked out his profile, and he's just like but obviously he's the same age as me, just a normal, everyday looking guy with grown-up kids and I suppose grandkids. And it didn't bring it all back. It just brought into complete focus. It's not over. It's this learning to live with it. It's this kind of just accepting that these things will happen, and this is who I've become as a result of that. He is still presumably in his hometown living his normal life, whatever that might be, and that's great. But it caused me, and it wasn't only him, it was several, but it caused that tipping point that actually maybe I've lived it was challenging in the beginning, but actually I'm living an incredible life.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
that's
something fresh off the press that just happened.
Oh wow, that is amazing. Yeah, that must be quite, I can't even imagine what that would feel like to actually see that bully now grown up and in his own life and that kind of thing. I can't even imagine that. I do agree, Mike, firstly, the story is incredibly inspirational, and it depends, doesn't it? It depends so much on how we look at our life events, how we process our life events, and also about what are we choosing. It's always about choice. What are we choosing from this experience? What are we choosing? Are we choosing to stay stuck in that story because it's there, or are we choosing something else that serves us in a better way? Now, when I say a better way, I mean a way where you can live your authentic life, where you can live who you truly are. When you were in the bank, that wasn't who you truly were. You said, you couldn't joke, you couldn't, be creative, you couldn't, when you were, as you keep saying, that small, short kid, of course you were, because you were very young, but there was so much more in there of you. And it's whether or not, when those hurdles, I suppose, obstacles, traumatic events come, what do we do with those? Are we making a choice to move forward? And as you say, you have the tipping point. And it's about, I think, sometimes being clear, how strong is my desire to move away from this story and into something else? That I can use this as a springboard.
Yeah. I'd like to say it was all part of a plan. It was my master plan. Of course it wasn't. It just was life happening, unfolding every day. And I don't even know whether it was a part of a bigger spiritual plan, because I'm not sure about that either. I think something that has it's just part of who I am, and it's helped incredibly through the years, is I am quite spiritual, and I've always known that. And so I've looked for things like the hypnosis I mentioned, and yoga, and Indian yoga as well. And I've been practicing meditation for probably 30 years, and I go to a Buddhist center. And it's almost like the Tesco thing, every little helps. It all goes into, would it help everybody, somebody else? who knows, but it's something that's part of my DNA as well.
Yeah.
And I remember reading a book by, I'm not sure I have the right name here, Shakti Gawain.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
30 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
And it was called How to Create Your Life, something like that, How to
Like
Create
that.
Your Life.
Yeah.
And it was just like, it's like when you go into a bookshop and for no reason, a book, it's almost like it calls to you from the shop saying, hey, pick me, pick me. And it was one of those books at the, when you read the right book at the right time.
Yes.
And yeah, so I think that has helped me, because I think I'm a searcher. I search for new things, whether it's in the training or the speaking that I do. But equally, as a songwriter many years ago, I went to Brazil for 2 weeks in the late 80s, early 90s, and just before I went, a friend of mine knew I was going, and he was into having his palm read and cards or whatever it was, and so he said, oh, why don't you do that before doing this? And so and of course I said no, I wasn't interested, but anyway, dragged me along. I was just going to wait in the waiting room while he had his done, and anyway I had mine done as well. And this guy who only knew my name, he looked at my hand, and obviously he's reading my lines or whatever, and he looked at my hand, and he said, I can see you're going across water quite soon. And I thought, okay, it's the Thames. It's the Thames, south of the river.
Yeah.
And I didn't say that to him, but I think he saw it on my face. He said, no, I think you're going, I think you're going over oceans, you're going over mountains, and you're going for longer than you imagine. So you're going for the next few weeks, and I was going 2 weeks later. And he said, you're going to be there for longer than you imagine. And I was there for a year.
Wow.
And he said, it's actually going to be quite a spiritual journey for you. And I don't know if you've been to Brazil, but Brazil, they've got the African spiritual influences mixed in with Christianity and the Virgin Mary and all this stuff. And it's very much melded over the hundreds of years that it's been in existence in Brazil. And this fascinated me. And so one of the songs I wrote while I was there, and I joined a band. Basically, I was in a bar one night, and somebody heard that there was a singer in the house, and they invited me on stage without asking if I wanted to. And by the time I came off, just jamming with their band, I was singing. I didn't know basically the manager was in the audience, and he'd signed me up for some gigs with the band, saying, oh yeah, he's the new singer.
Yeah.
So I got paid, and it just extended for a year. And I wrote a song about the spiritual journey, about this seeking, this looking, this being open to just finding the other or something else or whatever it was. But it wasn't you go to school, you go to college, you work in an office, and that's kind of it. I was very much into obviously a different journey. Yeah. So I think that's helped as well.
Definitely, but I think that's well, for me anyway, Mike, in what I do with energy work, and that I think it's incredibly important to be open and allowing. So, and it goes back to what you said about, with the Eastern tradition versus the West, to allow this situation that happened, so that then you could, as you allow that, so you can open up and allow something new. Because I think what is so important from your story and what you've just said is that you were able to create a reality by allowing a new reality.
Yeah.
And that's so important. We have to, first of all, give ourselves permission to allow a new reality. And that's what you did. Think about those things. So in other words, when you met the hypnotherapist, and you said it was like all the universe was conspiring with you, which I completely believe. I believe that as you have a strong enough desire, if you can be in a place of allowing, not staying in a story that doesn't feel good, but opening up more to allowing something new. You get the help that supports you in moving forward into what it is you want to achieve.
Yeah, I'm a massive believer in that. I've never actually kind of developed that. Is it maybe something like a kind of what's it called? Sensory acuity of sensing energy and but I'm a huge believer of it. So yeah, I completely agree with what you said.
Yeah, and imagine as well, Brazil, another example of that. So you going out there just in a place of allowing, you know, having fun, wanting to just enjoy, being open. Then you start jamming. The manager is in the house. Mm-hmm. He signs you up for gigs. So you then do what you love to do, singing, but get paid for it around Brazil.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty big experience that you allowed.
Yeah, there was some. There's so many stories within that. Like, we did a cover of at the time it was Sinead O'Connor's Prince song. What's it called? Nothing Compares to You.
Yes.
And we started singing that, and it was in a pizza. But it's very common in Brazil that when you go to a restaurant, there'll be live music in the corner. Whereas over here, when they're open, it's usually piped music, it's CDs or something. Yeah. And so it's just what they do in Brazil. They have a live band. It's usually jazz, but it can be, you know, it's some live music. And it's a huge scene over there to do that. And so we were doing this. It was a Pat's, I don't know, Friday night or whatever it was. It's huge, really big restaurant, and all candlelight on the table, and we were on the stage, and there was a guitarist and a keyboards player and a drummer and me, and they started to play the intro to this, and it's a really short intro, and then when Sinead O'Connor sings it, she starts singing the first line. It's been 15 hours and 15 days and 16 hours or something like that since you took your love away, and I started to sing this, and people just started to stand up and applaud.
Wow!
And it was almost like a magic moment. It was very, very emotional. Of course, the song was huge hits at that time, and it was an Englishman with an English accent singing it in this venue. And with that, it was like a rush of emotion. It was really hard not to cry at them, but to try to keep the emotion and keep control and sing the song. Yeah. And that was incredible. I mean, so those kind of things happened. I remember going.
So I was just about to say, you see, for me, that just shows, doesn't it, how when you're in that place of allowing and momentum builds, if we're not too busy resisting by saying, how am I going to do this? When is this going to happen? If only this, and all of that resistance, we can actually embrace and achieve what it is we want with fun, with joy, with ease.
Yeah. I mean, one concept I don't know, even if I got this from somewhere, it just fits with who I am, is that I look at life a little bit like a book, and everybody's got a book, and we're all writing our book by living our life. And sometimes we go from one chapter to the next, so from one relationship to the next, from school to college to whatever it is. And so what do we want to write in the book? And I don't think most people are consciously aware that by living the life that we're living and having the experiences, we are adding these stories to our book. But looking back, that was there was some difficult chapters, you know, the stutter and all this stuff. There was some amazing chapters, you know, the singing and the touring and Brazil and all the silly things. So many, you know, like falling off the stage and. You know, which actually was funny at the time as well.
Were you drunk?
Because when you, Well, there was a guitarist playing it was in the UK somewhere, and there was a guitarist playing a solo, and there was a strobe light going, flashing lights. And so I was dancing as you kind of do, and there was the stage was quite high, and I was dancing on the side of the stage, and some people in the audience by the stage doing the same. And because this strobe light was going, I could start to feel myself falling down off the stage. And it almost looked like that kind of it's an effect you sometimes see in movies where people go do, 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 do.
Yeah.
And then the strobe switched off and the guitarist finished, and I was laying in a heap on the floor, still holding my mic. And at that point you think, okay, there's only one way to go here. It's up back on the stage. And I carried on. And so I mean, it's one of those silly stories, but
no, that's great. Thank you so much, Mike. Honestly, I think I just love it, and I loved what you said just now. The book, it's our book. What do we want to write in the book? Our stories.
Yeah. As a coach, and I'm sure you know this, part of our training, one of the exercises is just to imagine you're old and grey, and you're sitting in that rocking chair, and there's a little child sitting at your just in front of you in the chair, and they're leaning on your lap, and they're saying your name and saying, tell me a story. So what kind of story do you want to tell them? Do you want to tell the story about how you didn't live the life you wanted, you weren't brave enough, or you lived somebody else's life? Or do you want to tell about the adventures, how you're Indiana Jones and you fought through, and what stories do you want to tell? Because this book we're writing, this life we're living, these experiences, whether it's spiritual or whatever they are, these are the stories that we're going to be telling. And so it's just for me in coaching, it's a really, really nice exercise to do.
Yeah, that's wonderful, Mike. Thank you. What a wonderful way to finish off. Thank you so much. That was so inspirational. And as always, it's always lovely to see you.
You're an angel. Thanks so much, Sandra.
You know I love you so much. You take care. Thank you, Mike.
Take care.
Before I get too emotional, I've got to say goodbye. Take care. Bye-bye, Mike. Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.